But the last chapter is all about emotional health, because he calls out, no point extending your life 20 years and being healthy for another 15 years if you fucking hate it, right? If you're hating it, if you're not enjoying what you're actually doing, then why would you even want to be in that suffering state for so much longer? Living longer is not just about more years, but living better years. Welcome back, Mere Mortalites, to another edition of the Mere Mortals book reviews. You have Juan here. Yes, your sometimes present individual in doing book reviews, but nevertheless, today we've got Outlive, The Science Art of Longevity by Dr. Peter Attia. Now, this book came out, quite a while ago now. And in fact, I read this a few months back, and I just have not had the opportunity to really sit down, put together my thoughts, structure them to actually present them back in a book review, have something that's going to be warranted to be valuable and not just be absolute dummy spitting into, a microphone. But Peter wrote down this book back in 2023, I believe, when this was published. So we're in 2024 at the moment when I'm recording this particular book review, and it's a chunky one. This is a chunky book. It does have a significant amount of references at the back. I'll call that out right now, probably on the order of 80 pages or so, which is quite good. When you see a book being referenced that much, probably think it's going to have some validity to it. Now, I'm going to probably start with who Peter Attia is, because at least for me, I know who Peter Attia is. I'll read the little cover that he's got in here just for individuals who might not know who Peter Attia is. For those who do, I'll simplify to say he's the bald guy who has the podcast Drive, enjoys Formula One racing, and has been in all the big podcasts out there that you might have known. But for those who don't know, and some of the background of him, it says here, founder of Early Medical. He received his medical degree from Stanford University School of Medicine, trained at Johns Hopkins Hospital in general surgery. So he was a practicing sort of surgeon there. Also trained at the NIH as a surgical oncology fellow at the National Cancer Institute, where his research focused on immune-based therapies for melanoma. And as I mentioned, or maybe didn't mention, he serves on the editorial board for the journal Aging and is a host of the popular podcast, The Drive. So that's at least where I know Peter Attia from, definitely not from the previous items. But as I've listened to him on the Drive podcast and then seen other things of him being on other interviews, seems like a very knowledgeable fellow. So normally when it comes to something like that, especially someone who can articulate really well as he's talking and everything, you go, okay, is he going to be just as good in the written format? And, well, find out. Stay tuned. I'll tell you what it is. But basically, the breakdown of what the actual book is, and it's normal with these sort of more longevity books. So, The Science and Art of Longevity, I've read a couple and reviewed a couple of books on here. Had mixed feelings with some of them. Some of them were great. Some of them were right. Some of them were the Tony Robbins one, where it kind of packed a lot of science, and he did it with Peter Diamandis and had a lot of info and new age stuff. Kind of good, kind of all right. Dave Asprey's one a little while back as well. I reviewed it. Technical, seemed good at the time. I've reviewed a lot of stuff afterwards, and Dave kind of hit and miss with some people. Again, in the space of health and fitness and science, there's a lot of who knows what. And it's interesting. Peter kind of not attacked. He calls it out. But the book split out into, let me actually just show you, 3 parts. We've got the first part, which was all about the long game. So he talks a lot of the medicine 2.0, medicine 3.0 breakdown, the fast death to slow death tactics, and some of the objective strategies and tactics. I'll talk about why he breaks that down. The second part was all around the the 4 Horsemen, I believe it was, as well as centenarians. And the third part is all around the tactical. So what do you do about this? And that's probably the overall synopsis to begin with, which is the way that Peter broke down this particular book was, look, I'm going to showcase you the strategy or the overarching long game as to why you would do this. And he went through a lot of detail of it's not just about living more years, but it is more about living better years in that longer term. There's a particular curve that he demonstrates in this book, which, for all intents and purposes, if you're viewing this, or at least I try to describe it, imagine a XY graph where you're kind of going across, and it starts to dip quite gradually, let's just say at around 70, 80 years old, and that would be around your between your lifespan and your health span, or how well you're healthily living in your body. That would decrease, and sort of like downward curve until you basically die. Where his explanation here on the science and art of longevity, or longevity in general, is have a real high leveled out type of biology, say like a line going all the way horizontally across as you start to age, so your health span is still quite high, or your ability to be healthy, and then it just sort of suddenly drops basically just before you die. The other concept that Peter, not just in this book, but in talking about things he discusses, the centenarian Olympics, or in other forms, the last decade of life, and being really healthy in that last decade of life. That gives you a bit of a concept around, he wants to be not necessarily looking at it with a lens of, oh, how do you live to 150 or 200 years old? But in the strategy he puts together on, it's not that, but how do you live well all the way to whatever outcome creates your death, whether that be early or later, just having a real healthy body all the way across. So the first part is just around the strategy of that. The second aspect of that is a lot of just informing the reader. Again, if you've read longevity books or health books in general, you'll see a lot of familiar stuff in there. As I did here, I'll discuss around the way that Peter talks in a moment around the book to give you a bit more understanding, I guess, why I enjoyed it so much. But he calls it the 4 Horsemen, which is the 4 major diseases which generally takes individuals' lives. And again, let me see if I can get it. Cancer, metabolic disease, Alzheimer's, and heart attacks or heart problems. Cardiovascular issues, something like that. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm a mere mortal. So I think those are the main sections that he talks about, and just goes into some detail. And the third part, tactical, right? What do you do? I'm going to give them away, although they're pretty common. Exercise. So exercise training, stability, nutrition, sleeping, and emotional health at the very end. And I'll leave a little note on that very end bit, and I'll talk about it at the end. So that's a breakdown, really, the synopsis of the actual book. Now, how well written is it? Again, I said, you think he's a great speaker. How to go about going from a book. Man, loved it. Holy shit. Really, really good at the way that he actually breaks down this particular book. Peter, I don't know how much help he got in structuring this particular book, or the words, and how I believe that he actually did write a lot of it, and then he had to like flush it down the toilet and begin again, or cut it down, something like that. So you can tell this book is really well written for it being a science book. Now, I mentioned a couple of other books, like can't remember what it was called, not Outlive, the Tony Robbins book for health, and a few of the others. They either tend to be too esoteric, high level. You're not really telling me the exact resources of where it's coming from, and you're kind of like wooey, or you're so heavy in the details of the latest cutting edge things that it is, while practically true, it's kind of unpractical to the general consumer, right? Because it's like, okay, but something you're telling me right now is all about getting access to this $1 million compound, and I can't get it, so I'm just going to die. So Peter, the way that he structures the book, it really goes at the strategy level at first. So why you would be wanting to do this, what is the benefit of health span being increased versus your lifespan being increased, the kind of definitions that he puts around, what does it mean to have the buildup in your arteries? What does it mean when you have troubles with your mind or all of your capabilities? And he does it in a really good way, in a way that even if you're not scientifically inclined, you'll understand it. There's a lot of analogies and comparisons, and as I'll talk probably in the more deeper points that I've noted down on this particular book, there's some really clever stories that he uses to inform the reader. Now, again, I read this book a few months ago, picked it up, did a couple of quick checks on my notes and whatnot, but honestly, I was able to absorb a lot of this book and a lot of the contents and stories and ideas in that first sort of read, because I think the way that Peter actually put this book together. Now, it is with Bill Gifford, so we'll call that out just in case he had a big hand in making it so well structured. So if so, that was amazing. Look, for me, the part 3 of the book as well was really, for me, really the informative thing. Was when I came into this book, I went, yeah, I've read before the strategies and whatnot. I want to hear Peter's take on the execution and what it actually means. For Peter, if you don't know this already, he favors a lot of exercise. I think he had a team kind of individually do a check, what is the number one thing that could improve health span? And I think training exercise actually beat sleeping and better eating and a few other things. I'm sure some people can debate that and fight that. That's just kind of what he came up, and maybe that's my interpretation of the information that he's presenting. But that was also quite interesting. But I will say my personal favorite of the book was the way that he described the arteries being blocked as cars on the road and people stopping by to someone's house and going in and actually bulking it up. You'll have to kind of read it to get the full information around that. That was brilliant, Peter. Holy shit, that was very well written. I love that analogy. I think I've retold that story like 4 or 5 times to different people because it was just so good. The final chapter as well has its own specific call out because in all of the book, it's dealing with the physical nature of things in the way that you eat and you train and you sleep and you look after yourself and a few other things, which totally makes sense, right? But you need a lot of that for the health span. But the last chapter is all about emotional health because he calls out, no point extending your life 20 years and being healthy for another 15 years if you fucking hate it, right? If you're hating it, if you're not enjoying what you're actually doing, then why would you even want to be in that suffering state for so much longer? And Peter gets pretty raw around the difficulties that he himself had, right? So if you've listened to it, I'm not going to go through it in too much detail. You'll probably have to go and read the actual book if you want to go through it. But yeah, Peter had a lot of troubles in the emotional health space, in the ways that he would articulate and get angry with his partner, with his work or colleagues, and what things would trigger him. From the outside in, you would see as someone who was incredibly successful. I read it out at the beginning, where he's known from and what he's done. You go, wow, successful individual, but had this underlying anger and emotional health issue that had he decided or found ways to outlive and live longer in a healthy way, and he hadn't corrected it, then it would have just been for null. So I guess I really like that he put that in there. He actually, I think he said he could almost written the whole book out of that last chapter. I get it. You can really do so. But again, the transparency in the book, the honesty, the way he structured the analogies to give the user, the reader, something that is probably pretty hard to conceptualize and put together in words. Kudos, Peter. This was amazing. Honestly, 8 or 9 out of 10. Would I recommend it? Yes, I would. Comparison to other books, again, there's freaking so many out there in relation to longevity and the science of it, and extensions and what you can take and the supplements and la. This one has done it the best that I've read so far. Have I read all of them? No. Can I see something getting better than this? Man, it would have to be freaking really good. Immortalized. Let me know if you think there's a better book than Outlive by Peter Attia for longevity. Tell me, because I will go and buy it immediately because this was just unbelievable, like really, really good. So I would highly recommend. Would I reread this book? Maybe not reread, but I would certainly have it in the bookshelf for passing on or for just going through the pages, just as a bit of a reminder. Almost to put it on something like a coffee table to always have it as a reminder. It was just that good. Anyways, I'm going to stop raving on about it. That's the book review for Outlive by Peter Attia, The Science and Art of Longevity. Stay tuned for the actual book lessons that I took away from this book. There's going to be quite a few. But for now, the Immortalites, I hope you're well. Thank you very much for staying tuned all the way through. Send your comments. Let me know what you thought about it. Have you read it? Did you not like it? If so, come and fight me. I'll find you outside my place, one-on-one. I'll outlive you. But no, for now, the Immortalites, be well, do all the good things. One out.